welcome to another Horrors of Netflix, and today we're going to be doing Cube.
I like that we both chose
both
to
had
do
an
exactly.
idea.
We didn't pre-plan that. That's just
completely
on-camera
spontaneous.
magic. Film entirely filmed in a Canadian soundstage,
Yeah, kind of science
but
fiction.
not a porno.
Are there many Canadian pornos?
Probably.
You're the man who would be able to answer
I've
that
come to
question.
fix your pipes, eh? No problems.
What are you talking about?
Sorry, Canada. So quite an interesting film.
Yeah, it's sort of a science fiction locked room.
Science
drama.
fiction, psychological thriller horror was
Locked
the
room. There's
definition.
locked room in there somewhere as well.
/ haunted house
It
type.
kind of has a similar sort of feel to, you know, those old kind of drama things where someone's locked in a bunch of people are locked in a room with a corpse and they bicker back and forth. It's just a setup to put people together in a situation where they'll play off against each other. Kind of like that, but is that Santa?
What the fuck is that noise?
I think we may need to investigate.
Sorry,
this.
just
Back in a moment.
so
So the basic setup, Callum?
essentially, it starts off with a group of people that are trapped inside these strange cubes, and they're interlinked to various other cubes within, assumingly at the start, a larger structure. Certain cubes have traps in them, and ultimately they're trying to find their way out of this, and they have no idea why they're there. They don't know each other. There's nothing that they can think of that's actually created some kind of...
But it gradually becomes apparent that although there seems to be no pattern to who's been selected, that each one of them is there for a reason, that each one of them has a skill, even though it's not necessarily apparent that they seem to have been selected for the task.
Yeah, it kind of
as a
ultimately
test or
comes
something.
out that you've got one guy who's the kind of like, I don't want to say
this a
strong
spoiler?
man, but like, well, in terms of like the archetypes, he's like a
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of like alpha male type
Yeah,
character, and then there's kind of ultimately kind of different intellects. You know, there's like a doctor, there's a mathematician, for example. We won't go into any of the other people,
Which,
but
but the movie's quite interesting because as they continue through this maze almost,
Labyrinth,
yeah, well,
to quote David Bowie.
yeah, I guess there's synonyms for the same thing, but as
What's the difference between a maze and a labyrinth?
the same thing.
Really?
I think a labyrinth is underground, maybe. Answers in a postcard, folks. But yeah, as they travel through it, they discover more and more about the rules of what happens, why they're there, why some rooms are trapped and some aren't, and what the
I think there's clues that initially they misinterpret, but ultimately, and it's interesting to see how the different characters with their different skill sets and personalities perceive the clues.
It's interesting though because there's some really, really hokey performances in this film. I will admit I did enjoy
I think
this
that's
film.
the weakest part of it.
but
The
there's
premise
some
is
very-
strong, but
I don't know whether it's the performances or the dialogue as written in the script because I don't think the screenwriters were first language English speakers.
the dialogue's pants.
But the characters are very interesting nevertheless, and I think that as you discover more and more about the maze and as the rules kind of keep getting flipped on their head, your perceptions of the characters also get flipped on their head. You go through the same thing with the characters as you go through with the maze, which I think is quite clever.
Yeah.
It's almost a kind of metaphor there, a kind of parallel drawn between them, because quite a few times your kind of allegiance to certain characters just flips
And it turns into kind of a Lord of the Flies scenario, as a lot of these survival things do, similar to what we saw in a movie we reviewed recently, The Mist.
Okay.
I think it breaks down to these kind of group, and little cliques form amongst a very small group of about 4 or 5 people, but still, you know, they rub each other up the wrong way, and I think the kind of constant stress of their environment kind of heightens that,
but it reveals what's underneath as well.
Yeah.
With some of them. But yes, the performances. There's, what did you say it was? School of Ham.
School of Ham, definitely. I mean, some of them are just ramped up to like.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's
like,
not much subtlety going on in terms of performance.
There's a couple of performances in it that would put Jeffrey Combs to shame. And I'm not
Jeffrey Combs is
saying
a
no. I'm
brilliant
not
actor.
saying now. Let me explain myself. I'm talking about in terms of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Combs is a grade A actor who has a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But some of the enthusiasm in some of these performances are through the roof.
I think
and they're misplaced
Jeffrey
largely.
Combs' Jeffrey Combs' enthusiasm in most of his roles is quite well channeled.
Yeah, but
Whereas-
these
whereas
are just
these are
scattergun. They're coming in
it's
double
just
barrel shotguns.
Like a straightforward line is delivered like it's Hamlet. You
Yeah.
know, everything is so like ramped up to 11.
Some of it's
Would you call it a
questionable.
horror film?
I would probably, again, it's one of these interesting ones. That's where the psychological element of it comes in, where like the traps initially are terrible, but ultimately the horror actually becomes from the kind of
The characters,
weakening
the psychological
minds
element.
of
It
the,
starts off really gory and really quite violent, and there throughout.
I think
there
that's
is-
to pull people in though,
Yeah.
because I think there's
I think
always
there is-
going to be those people watching this that need to
it
see a bit
smacks
of
you
that.
right
Yeah.
at the beginning because it's one of these films. Not to give too much away, but it starts out going a certain direction with a certain person, and then flips you around. Not going to spoil it, but it when it hits you hard, and that's one thing about the film though. It is generally quite low key. Not low key because it's not, but generally it's quite psychological. There is violence in the film as well, and there is physical horror, and it kind of comes out of nowhere at times, and it's really sudden and really grotesque. For the most part, it's not heavily gory, but when it is gory, it's
It's
really
pretty
quite
out there.
horrible.
Plus, some of the effects are really quite. I mean, there's some really rotten CGI in some parts of it, like some of the wires and
spikes and
stuff.
stuff.
Like,
Yeah, but
which is
there's
a
also-
shame because they constructed such a fantastic set.
The set design is amazing. It's one of those movies like the first Alien film where you look at the set, and although it is a very simple set, and for each of the cubes, they probably just used the same.
Now,
set
can I
and-
shock you? I've actually got some facts about this
Really?
film.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
The whole film is shot in one cube.
Right.
They've only had one
Aye.
cube, and then they
Different
had
colours.
a partially
Yeah.
constructed other cube for shots where you show in between.
Go in
Because
between.
every cube, obviously, I don't want to get into it, has got 6 different entry points in it, and depending on which one you go into, there'll either be a trap or
Yeah.
it'll be a safe room. Anyway. Essentially, all they had was one cube, and they could change the colour of it by shining different lights
Yeah.
through it. Apparently, there was meant to be 6 different colours, but the budget couldn't stretch to that.
Oh, gels.
These crazy Canadians.
Yeah. They couldn't afford like little sweetie wrappers to hold
Just
up
to
over
stick
the
up. Well, it
lights,
was done with gels on
Yeah,
lights.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, it's really kind of low tech, but at the same time, it's great.
But
And
it
in
is,
that-
I mean, the design of that, although yeah, you're right, it's just one cube. The design on it, and the design on the traps, and the design
It's
on
very
the details.
Hellraiser-esque.
Yeah, it's so intricate and so like just the even little details like to come back to what I was saying about Alien. Aliens is one of those movies where the set design and everything's amazing, and
Almost
in
a
Alien,
character
when
in
she's
itself.
when she's gonna detonate the ship, she has to pull up these big cylinders that kind of unravel and then open up, and you're like, that's so intricate. Someone's
Yeah.
had to sit and build that. Well, the set in this film is quite like that. You know, the way the doors open and it comes out, it slides down.
Yeah.
You think that's not CGI and that's not like being
It's,
mass-produced.
it's
This
come
is just a
from an
small
idea
budget.
that's had a lot of love
Yeah.
for it, and it's certainly
The-
grown out of it.
It's very the set design, the cinematography is pretty good given that it's all in one room as well.
Yeah.
It keeps it visually really interesting.
There's some strange things with speed sometimes they do. They speed it up, I think, a few times
yeah.
to give kind of a strange concept of time, which is quite good as well because they managed to
Oh yeah, there's
work
some
on
weird montages which we're
Yeah.
gonna come to. There's one really cheesy montage where
she's working out all the stuff.
and the characters
Yeah.
are like having banter over like lots of panning shots.
Yeah,
of,
yeah,
like, the
that's
walls
right. Yeah,
stuff,
and they're
which
just
is
having
really,
a chat, and she's
Yeah.
like, he's like, I'm talking about making dinner and
It's
shit.
like, yeah, then you got yourself a date. And all that
yeah,
shit. It's
she-
like completely like out of character. With the
I think
rest
she's
of the
meant to be
film.
like super young,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well, and then all of a sudden you're like,
But then that does presage something that happens later, which
Yeah.
which makes it a lot darker.
Spoilers.
Not to give it away. There are moments of real tension though.
yeah, no,
there are
definitely.
some to come back to the kind of horror elements of it. I'd say it's probably more a horror than a sci-fi because there's nothing in terms of what the. Okay, it's like a kind of outrageous machine that they're in this kind of fantastical thing, but there's nothing I guess that couldn't be built.
Well,
with
there's
enough
nothing
money.
that dates
There's
it
nothing
though in
futuristic.
terms of time wise though.
Yeah, no, that's true. But
Though in terms of that though, I don't know how the cube's actually supported within its outer
I
structure.
think it's like a Rubik's cube, like they're all got like rails and stuff.
No, but I mean like the outer structure of it.
Oh,
how
okay,
that-
okay.
You won't
But-
know
but
this until
anyway-
you see the film. but-
Anyway, I think it's more like there's a lot more like this sort of tension and just fear in the characters, but I think it's heavily implied to be set in the present day.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like you don't actually see their outfits or anything like that, but the things that they say, things. They
Yeah,
talk
there's
about.
nothing that would make you do it, or even
yeah.
maybe slightly in the past.
The characters look at that and are looking around and they're as confused as we are. That obviously the technology and stuff around them is not sort of familiar to them, but it's genuinely tense in places. I mean, there was that moment. Again, not to give too much away, but there's a moment in the film where they're trying to pass through a cube that is trapped, and it's a sound activated trap. And that was genuinely not giving too much away, but there's some genuinely nail biting stuff,
and it's quite
really
well handled.
done.
I think the other thing as well is it's a really low budget movie. I mean, it's $300,000.
It's not Ghastly Tales low budget.
Yeah, not Ghastly. Yeah, it's not Pound Shop, but it's $300,000. I assume maybe Canadian. Which is even worth even less than the dollar. Not that you've got a worthless currency, guys. I'm just saying numbers don't lie. But you know, which is quite an impressive feat in itself, and I think that comes down to the one set. But the one thing that I thought was interesting about it, because it's got this kind of one set setup, it's almost a bit like it could almost be a play.
Yeah, that's what I was. That's what I was kind of getting at with the whole locked room drama thing.
Yeah.
Yes, the one location, obviously, part of that is a budgetary thing, but I get the feeling that even if they had $100 million to spend, they'd have probably still set it in some isolated, and it's this kind of the same thing as like the Night of the Living Dead and those kind of siege movies, but instead of being a siege or trap. There's another film quite similar to this. I think it's called Fermat's Room or something like that. We should do that if it's on Netflix, because I think I might have seen it on Netflix at one point. It's about these people are trapped in a room that's getting smaller, like moving it. So it's one of those little kind of closed in, and the horror and the drama and everything just comes from the characters, really. Although the set's amazing and there's some okay effects in it, it's all just a kind of ruse, a setup to put these characters into conflict with each other and see what comes out.
Do you know it's a tribute to a Twilight Zone episode?
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's got that vibe
a Twilight
to
Zone feel to it, yeah.
Which I think is a good compliment to the movie. So I mean, I definitely think it's got a very strong premise. I think they set out to do it with a lot of love, but I think the weakest part of it is some of the really hammy performances that are possibly spurred on by some pretty subpar.
I think the script is a really intelligent script, and in fact, there's not the dialogue, but the actual concept and what they're going for. Because as I say, that there's like a clear metaphor with the cube and the personalities of the people, and I won't go into it too much to not spoil anything. And there's a really interesting idea with like an autistic guy, like an idiot savant. That, again, not to spoil too much. Well, no, that's the term people used for hundreds of years for it. It's not. No, he's not an idiot. Idiot savant. People know what you're talking about if you say that. Yeah,
no, but that actual element of it only comes out later on.
A quarter of the way in the film, but I'm not giving it in a way of. It's pretty clear what's going on.
Do you know this movie was pitched
something I was going
in
to
an
say.
Elevator?
Really? The guy's probably looking at the elevator thinking
he created a short film of 5 people stuck in an elevator.
Okay.
And that was how they brought out. Sorry, I was kind of confused that there. Rather than being an elevator pitch where
I was going to say
a minute, it was pitched as a film in an elevator.
Okay.
But
well, it kind of is. They are. Each of those are like they're elevator type devices that move around. But there's another element that I thought was really clever is now. There's a huge mystery. The film leaves a lot of questions, even at the end. It's not a film where everything's explained, which I really like. Cause that's
like Michael Jackson's Stranger in Moscow. That many questions.
Yes, exactly. And it's not like Hollywood to produce a movie which doesn't answer everything.
That's why the closest
they get, but it's still. I think there's still Hollywood money, and it was still major release. I
remember French
money.
money.
I remember it being in the cinemas. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that's right. The Canadians could get a movie.
Canadians can get cinemas.
Without those Yanks.
Videos for Canadians. No,
that's
kidding.
Probably the Queen got it past. It's still some kind of British Commonwealth.
Yeah. So the closest you get to an explanation for why they're in there, because it's never really explained, is a sort of this kind of really. I'm not giving too much.
Not in this film anyway. Other than the 2 subsequent sequels.
Torn apart in the 2 sequels, but which I've not yet seen. But I just hope they don't fuck it up too badly. It's this kind of Kafkaesque idea that the cube almost sort of made itself. That within all the bureaucracy and it's sort of the right hand not knowing what the left hand's
Yeah.
doing within government.
Is it governments? Is it aliens?
There's no one actually behind it. There's just so many different people working separately from each other that almost supernaturally this thing is
It
coming
almost
to
gets
being,
to be
which is quite an
Lovecraftian in
interesting
that sense.
idea. Yeah,
There's like this.
the idea that there's almost like kind of like a in between everyone there's like a tune playing that no one person put together, but almost subconsciously through all these people working together have created this thing. It's quite an interesting idea.
I think we're probably rabbiting on a bit.
Yeah, I think we are, but I think it was a smart film, let down by some hammy performances, but I think still a solid 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd be tempted to say around about 7. I think if some of the dialogue had been cleaned up and some of the performances seemed reined back, I don't necessarily think they were the wrong actors for it. I think like
They had the wrong lines to give.
They looked the part, they had the right kind of stereotypes, but I think probably there should have been points where the director should have reined in and just went, get down from the ceiling.
I get the feeling the directors maybe told them. It has the feeling of the acting in an Italian zombie movie, where the director and the screenwriter doesn't speak the language that the actors are acting in.
Oh no, the cube!
Yeah,
the cube!
Yeah. And so they're thinking about their own language and how people would intone things in their own language and how people would deliver lines in their language, and it doesn't work in English.
I wonder what the Italian title is. El Cube.
It's Spanish.
I know.
I
don't speak Italian or Spanish. We
Cube
really should. We're terrible in Europe. Everyone else in Europe speaks about 40 languages. In the UK, we don't bother.
We're definitely
We
rabbiting
should sort
on
that out. We are definitely rabbiting that on.
Take care, guys.
Go and watch it. Go and watch it. If you're paying for Netflix, go and watch The
It's
Cube.
definitely
It's
worth
worth
a
it.
watch.
And it's only about an hour and a half.
Yeah, I was kind of... It was one of those films that for years and years I kind of looked at it, it's like, yeah, it's just a bunch of people stuck in a room, it's going to be crap, it's going to be boring, and I always put off watching it, never get around to watching it. You made me watch it, and it was worth it.
Didn't me.
If I liked it, you'll probably like it.